Hey everyone, it's Lal Winstrom, the Subspace Meditator here, and I wanted to record some of my thoughts for you on Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, like most people, I saw The Force Awakens on December 18th of last year when it premiered. The official day, December the 18th, that Friday of the month, and I was quite excited to get my opportunity to go out and see the movie, and so I wanted to record for you some of my own personal reflections on The Force Awakens. Now, I am going to be instead of just talking to you off the cuff about the movie, I'm going to be reading to you my reflections on The Force Awakens that come from my blog, the Talaxion Particle blogspot.com, and the reason for the name is because I am also a science fiction writer, and I've been working on my own story, the Talaxion Particle, for the last 7 to 8 years, starting in 2007. So I'm no novice to the area of science fiction. I was introduced to science fiction by my late grandfather, who was also a big science fiction fan, loved the old science fiction serial Doctor Who. Some of you are probably quite familiar with that. I grew up watching that, as well as watching a lot of some of the old science fiction serials like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and many of the other things that he loved. And so I'm no novice to science fiction at all. Got my own interest in science fiction through Star Wars first as a child, and then through Star Trek later on thereafter. So anyway, I'm going to be reading to you my reflections on The Force Awakens, and I'm going to post a link in the low bar for you where you can go and read my blog for yourself and get an idea of where I think this story went and possibly where it's going. So let's get started. And the first title for the first part of this story, or the first part of my essay, is Star Wars The Force Awakens Part 1, an anticipated story for a new generation. Let's begin. Star Wars The Force Awakens officially opened in the United States December 18th, 2015. The anticipation was high for this movie. In fact, it was probably the most anticipated movie of the year, and if measured by both weekend turnout and profits from 12/17 through 12/20, the movie was runaway successful. Now, I should point out here that while the movie officially opened on December the 18th, it also had showings that Thursday, the preceding day, December the 17th. So it did open unofficially one day before, but officially on December the 18th, that Friday of December 2015. So let's continue. Indeed, online ticket sales prior to the opening topped $100 million, and current information suggests the movie is well on its way to topping $300 million before Christmas domestically in the United States and more than $500 million internationally. It was the movie event of 2015, with nearly 3 generations of viewers waiting on the edge for their chance to be part of a big production. But was the anticipation worth the wait? Did the product deliver on the hype? This series of meditations will take a critical look at Star Wars Episode 7 and answer those questions from the Subspace Meditator's point of view. Now, I have to warn you, from here on out, I will be weaving some major spoilers into my critique of this movie. If you haven't seen The Force Awakens yet for whatever reason, and you don't want to be spoiled, stop listening now. If you don't mind that sort of thing, then press forward. But you have been warned, dear people. Now, as stated, I will be weaving plot pointers into my critical review of the story, so do not expect to see a straight-up linear exposition of what happened from A to B to C. Do not either look to see every detail of the story tied into this analysis. Instead, listen for what jumped out at me in the big picture with specific events keyed in. Now, this is your last chance. I'm warning you again, there's a spoiler zone ahead. So if you don't want to hear any more details about this, stop listening now. If you are ready to go forward, then let's proceed. The plot. A New Hope redo. I'll candidly admit that I walked out of The Force Awakens both satisfied and unsatisfied, that I was somewhat taken away by the fan camaraderie and my own desire that this be a fun story I could get along with. And so, because of that, I came out of the theater giving The Force Awakens a reasonably positive rating of 3 stars. Sadly, the more I've reflected on it, that rating must be revised downward to 2.0 to 2.5 stars, and that's being magnanimous. The Force Awakens made generous use, if that is the right word, of plot elements from A New Hope and, to a lesser degree, other aspects of episodes 5 through 6. One of the most obvious of these was A New Hope's use of the droid R2-D2 being sent on a mission by Princess Leia to find the aging Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi in order to enlist his aid in delivering the Empire's plans for the Death Star to the Rebel Alliance of the era. This plot device is practically mirrored by The Force Awakens when now General Leia Organa sends the beach ball-like BB-88 on a mission to find missing Jedi Luke Skywalker, who has now also ascended to the rank of Master and exiled himself to a remote planet where the very first Jedi Temple was built thousands of years ago. Apparently, Skywalker is the key to defeating the First Order, the replacement galactic tyranny risen from the ashes of the old Empire and hell-bent on dominating the stars in its shadow. How or why the new First Order has arisen is barely touched upon and is one of the plethora of severe plot holes in The Force Awakens. However, this is not the only plot device borrowed by The Force Awakens. Just as in A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, we are given a new, bigger, planet-sized Death Star called Starkiller Base, capable of wiping out not just one planet at a time, but multiple ones simultaneously, and from what appears to be dozens, if not more, light years away, all by using the energy of a living star to siphon that which it siphons off using its big red eye. Now, here, I'm not going to go into the physics of Starkiller Base, although it would be very easy, quite frankly, to break down Starkiller Base and show you how nonsensical this plot device was. I think it's sufficient, however, enough to suspend disbelief in this case and just go off with the idea that, quite frankly, this is another Death Star type of device that's been used now in 3 movies, and I think it was stupid of The Force Awakens to rely on this device. But let's continue on and suspend disbelief on the impossibilities or the improbabilities, at the very least, of Starkiller Base's physics. Yet, somehow, this whopping superweapon is possessed of virtually the same fatal design flaws and weaknesses of the very first Death Star from A New Hope, and is destroyed in virtually the same fashion. And when it comes time to defend this overpowered big boy from enemy attack, there appears to be no Starfleet in orbit with any capital ships of merit, nor an adequate defense fighter battalion with the sheer numbers to make the difference against the meager resistance space forces. Consequently, just as in A New Hope, the Resistance Attack Squadron is able to fly into what is the heart of this base and, with a handful of X-Wing fighters, cripple it to total abandonment. It is like the First Order learned nothing from its predecessor tyranny about creating or defending what is a key piece of space real estate. Quite frankly, this was sloppy, unimaginative, lazy writing of which I blame director and co-script producer J.J. Abrams for, a man who is known for creating mindless, dumbed-down action without any real purpose or basis behind it. He did it in Star Trek 2009 and Into Darkness, and he's done it again here. On with the show. This is not all. On a near point-per-point basis, the plot of The Force Awakens is an almost carbon copy of Episode 4, A New Hope. A super spaceship looms menacingly over a planet. A robot is sent on a secret mission to find a long-missing Jedi Master. The robot encounters a lone, adventure-seeking youth on a remote desert planet. The adventurous youth loses their family on the desert world. The adventurous youth runs into a rogue pilot and is whisked away on an epic journey that will alter their destiny forever. And on and on. Do you see some patterns emerging here, folks, especially those of you who have seen A New Hope? I will not catalog every instance of this asinine ripoff because to do so will tax my patience and yours. And I can accept, quite frankly, some nod to the old stories with maybe some, Hail Marys and Hail Mary passes, if you will, with a few elements that repeated themselves. But if you look at The Force Awakens, you see these elements being repeated ad nauseum throughout this movie. And it becomes not just annoying, but disgusting. But let's go on. I do ask this question, though. Given J.J. Abrams' idiotic Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan / Into Darkness plagiarism, this mindlessness begs a very serious question. Will Star Wars Episode 8 be a regurgitation of The Empire Strikes Back, just with different settings and characters and minor plot adjustments? But let's go on with what I really want to talk about. The true subject of this post, the characters. Specifically, I wish to discuss the male characters in this part, leaving the female ones for part 2 as I have a definitive reason for separating the groups. So let's start with Han Solo. Not much needs to be said about Han Solo or Chewbacca, who also shows up in the movie, because these are two iconic characters whose backgrounds we know prior to The Force Awakens. They have both been firmly established by episodes 4 through 6 and by various treatments in the expanded universe. Everyone knows them by now very well. What we should be looking at here is how the two characters have changed in the intervening 3 decades since Return of the Jedi and where that leads The Force Awakens. And the answer, I'm afraid, is not very much. If what we saw on the screen is to be believed, somehow neither the galaxy's most famous bad boy nor his ever-loyal sidekick have changed nor advanced much since they helped destroy the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, overthrowing the Empire and its ruthlessly tyrannical Emperor Palpatine. Having gone from being a general in the Rebel Alliance, after the dust settles, somewhere between evolving from a smuggler to a war hero, Han Solo returns to us not as a more mature and seasoned man with 30-plus years experience behind him, but as the same smuggling, conniving swindler he was before he joined the Rebel Alliance as a liberator of the galaxy, and Chewbacca goes with him. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but this doesn't sit right with me. How does this happen? And why? No logical exposition for this move is made for what happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, so no emotional attachment nor understanding beyond nostalgia for the characters can be invested. There is nothing demonstrable in either of these characters' portrayals, and thus nothing bold or risky in them either. Moving on, though. Somewhere between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, Solo loses the Millennium Falcon only to miraculously find it adrift in space 30 years later after a wayward distress beacon is activated by the fumbling efforts of our new heroes, Finn and Rey. This is one of the most unbelievable Deus Ex Machina moments of the storyline inserted to ease Solo and Chewie into the picture. We are supposed to believe that in the vastness of interstellar space, one lone homing beacon goes off long enough and far enough that Solo, who is conveniently close enough, receives and recognizes it and comes running across who knows how many light years of space to reclaim his old ship from whoever or whatever has stolen it from him. Never mind the fact that it's never told how he lost the ship in the first place. Yes, it is nice to see Solo and the big walking carpet again, and I'm sure those of you who've seen A New Hope got that reference. But this is all very lazy and unsophisticated plot resolution on the part of those who created this movie, and it's quite disappointing, and I would also dare say very disgusting and disturbing. But let's go on. Further, the reunion between Solo and Princess, now General Leia Organa, is rushed, forced, and awkward. In the one and only brief personal scene between them, we are treated to a minor but cryptic exposition as to what separated them and how they've gotten along without one another for 30 years. However, this emotional investment is small, and rather than giving these two super iconic people the screen time they deserve together, we are whisked away with Solo again on a mission to destroy Starkiller Base with Rey and Finn. What is of major significance, however, in the reveal of Solo and Leia is that somewhere between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens they got married and had at least one kid, Ben Solo, who turns out to be the grandson of Anakin Skywalker. You recall that Leia is Luke Skywalker's sister. He is also the nephew and once Jedi apprentice of Master Luke Skywalker and the primary antagonist of The Force Awakens, And this leads us to our next, and to me, most compelling character of the movie. Kylo Ren. Easily the most potentially interesting character of The Force Awakens, Ben Solo, aka Kylo Ren, is the powerful Force-sensitive bad guy who terrorizes the galactic neighborhood in the name of the dark side. Spurred on by his concealed Dark Master Supreme Leader Snoke, Ren is the face of the power behind the power, very much as Darth Vader was apprentice and proxy to Emperor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious. In fact, it is Darth Vader whom Kylo Ren fancies himself in the shadow of and whom he wishes to emulate. But Kylo is a conflicted being, of himself inexplicably drawn to the light side of the Force and fighting it, but simultaneously trying very hard to live up to the shadow of a long-dead grandfather whom himself renounced the dark side at the end of his life. So why is Ren so bent on being a Darksider? Is it due to the unyielding influence of Snoke, whom himself is also a dark side Force Master? Or are there different motivations having nothing to do with Snoke? As compelling as this character first comes across, Kylo Ren, instead of being an intimidating and calculating Darksider, soon de-evolves, acting more like a whiny, skulking teenager whose hormones severely unbalance his mental and emotional state. Any strength Ren has in the Force, any skill he wields with a lightsaber, any long-range plans he is to carry out on behalf of his hidden Dark Master are all eventually drowned out in a wishy-washy emo guy who's trying desperately to get in touch with his feelings. He throws fits when things don't go his way to the point of destroying whole control consoles with his lightsaber in rage-induced cut and slash fests. He miscalculates critical openings in his opponent's weaknesses, leaving himself and the First Order open to obvious gaps in their counterattacks. He is not a mature strategist, Force user, or warrior by any measure. It is clear to see that Kylo Ren, though physically an adult, is still an adolescent boy whose growth has been stunted by unresolved daddy issues between himself and Han Solo. Now, I think it's safe to say that he represents the weakest Sith or Sith-affiliated Darksider in the history of the Sith. Indeed, it is my opinion that Darth Maul would have wiped the floor with him, and Darth Sidious would be too humiliated to even speak his name. Now I'm going to stop there. I chose not to, I'm not going to include my evaluation of Poe Dameron in this particular video, although I do think Poe Dameron was probably one of the more believable characters in the story. And I also chose not to do a thorough analysis or a more thoughtful and considered analysis on the general of the story, General Hux. For those of you who remember this Adolf Hitler photocopy, who is probably supposed to be, in terms of Star Wars, in the vein of Grand Moff Williff Tarkin from the original Star Wars, Episode 4, New Hope, is you also see he is another derivative character, just like Poe Dameron is probably another derivative character in the vein of Wedge Antilles, and just like so many other elements in this story which are derivative of A New Hope, and which is one of the major criticisms that has been levied against this Force Awakens movie. So I chose not to do those two characters, but you can read it on my blog, and again, a link to my blog will be in the low bar for this description. That ends part 1 of this analysis, therefore. Part 2 is going to take up where I talk about the women of The Force Awakens and what I believe was a very specific agenda that relates to them, and where I think that might be going, and then we'll go further from there with some other reflections. So until then, we'll see you next time.